Welcome to the end of Christianity as we know it, and today we are talking about online seminary and residential education. So, Dr. Lyons, you've been in the AALC for quite a while now, and since around the time that you started, that is when ALTS was starting to be formed as we currently know it today. Can you talk a little bit about why? Why did we start an online seminary?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. And I'll probably do that in three pieces, if I may. What I'd like to do is go back 20 years in my own story, because at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, I was doing research on my dissertation that took me to Germany and Scandinavian countries to talk about Lutherans in conversation with Roman Catholics and other Protestant denominations. So a lot of German bishops' councils and Swiss bishops' councils and so forth. At the same time, I was also visiting Los Comunidades de Base, the base Christian communities in Central America, particularly in El Salvador and Nicaragua. And I was seeing two very different worlds, the global South as opposed to what was going on in Europe primarily and Scandinavian countries. Now, fast forward those 20 years, and I had been visiting more in Central and South America and in Western and Southern Africa and in Southeast Asia and in Eastern Europe, building relationships with pastors and congregations in a variety of places around the world. And I was a parish pastor the whole time, but I would take a couple of weeks, at least a couple of weeks each year, and go to visit an area, a country, and a specific area. And some places I visited 18 times out of 18 or 20 years. Other places I'd go once and not return. What I began to see was the radical inefficiency of what I was doing. There was no prolonged theological education except in one place, and I could only go there twice a year because I was a parish pastor. Wouldn't it be wonderful if there were an opportunity using some technology to be in everyone's living room every night when they come home from work? Or frankly, most of these guys I was seeing were in the jungles or in extremely depressed areas. So they didn't have potable water or electricity, much less internet. But if we could get an internet connection, I'm thinking in the 90s, and then by the year 2010, there were internet connections available in the global South. And it was extremely exciting to think about building those relationships and providing that kind of theological education, credible theological education. And we began to think about being the premier confessional Lutheran theological seminary accessible to the world. So I'll stop there and see what your thoughts are.
I guess I'd love to hear more about what were their churches like. How did men get called into ministry? Because I'm thinking if they had a man that they had probably raised up, right, and if they were struggling to get by with portable water and all those things, the idea of even sending them abroad for 4 years to go be educated to come back, I mean, that's a pretty unfair ask in a lot of these contexts and just impossible.
Yeah, I'd be invited into an area, and men would walk hours or days, literally, to a central location, and they would bring paper and pencil, and I would teach after breakfast from 9 to 12, after lunch from 1 to 5. We'd take a little break, and then the whole village, wherever we were, would come out. Now, it's after 6 o'clock, the sun goes down, and so you bring out a generator, a portable generator, and a 36-inch fluorescent light tube, and the whole village gathers around, and we have a worship service and teaching or preaching. So what was education like for them? Well, their pastor had taken someone under his wing as a young protege, as a Timothy to a Paul, taken him under the wing and taught him. It would bring him with him on his visits out into the bush. It would stay with him as he prepared teachings or sermons or what have you, and talk about what it was like. But it's very difficult to understand what it was like for those guys. I mean, they're in constant threat from shaman and witch doctors and people who don't want them to teach Christianity, or those who want it to be um, in some way assimilated into what's currently being taught in an animistic culture, um, so that the previous gods become names of saints and the home altars become Christianized altars. Um, wow, there's a tremendous amount of need for theological education, because these aren't new things. We've been facing these kinds of things from the first, second, and third centuries, all kinds of heretical teachings and doctrines. They faced it daily, and they faced it with very little theological education, and sometimes not even a Bible in their own language.
I think that's hard for us to even picture in our context, right? I mean, not having a Bible in our own language, having to walk days to get somewhere. I mean, and in a way, I think you brought up Timothy and Paul and Dr. Kahi. I mean, I'd love you to talk about this. I mean, that is pastoral formation for the apostles, right? I mean, that's what Paul was doing, going to churches.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to add, except that I don't think in our American Western situation we know anything like the kind of sacrifice that those African men had to make. We're just so convenience oriented that we don't have any concept of that.
And in a way, I think online seminary, whether that's in the global south, whether that's in Europe or Asia, this idea of a pastor, taking someone under their wing, guiding them, and then where we come in is that then that pastor probably doesn't have the bandwidth or maybe the ability to teach everything that man needs to know. And so then we step in to fill that in while he's mentoring him. And then I think that part of the thesis of ALTS is that this is an incredibly biblical model. It's a patristic model. It's a model that works across the world. It's a model that is certainly not in innovation. The technology is an innovation. The delivery mechanism is an innovation. But raising up local leaders and equipping those saints to then do the work of the church, that's what the church has been about for generations. And it's certainly not new. And I think that that's a really unique aspect of us. But you mentioned that there are two more bags that you brought along with you in this story. It's like, what was the second aspect of this?
So the first was the passion to care for those in the global south, because I had been so efficient in my attempts to do that. And I saw in online seminary an opportunity to do that which I could not do, which was maintain relationships. And I think we're going to be talking a lot about building and maintaining human relationships and providing genuine pastoral care. That's going to be a real distinctive for ALTS, and it began to be birthed in our realization that we needed to care for the global south. The second of the bags I brought with me was that during my time as a parish pastor, I would always invite the local clergy, wherever I was serving, to a pericope study. Typically every Tuesday morning we'd do that. So that was a lot of fun, because guys wanted to do that. Roman Catholics and Episcopalians and Baptists and Presbyterians, Church of God, evangelicals, and even non-denominational guys. I'd invite everybody, because everybody wanted to talk. And frankly, many of the fellows wanted to learn, especially fellows who had not had the advantage of a graduate level theological education. So they may have gone to Bible college, and that was great. But typically after 10 or 15 years in the parish, maybe before that time, maybe 5 years in the parish, they're saying, gee, I really need to know about such and such. And so we talk about sound doctrine, and we talk about church history, and we talk about ancient languages and exegesis, and preaching technique and teaching technique and so forth. We're talking about these things, just brothers together, although we had very different theological backgrounds and beliefs. I found especially the evangelical and non-denominational fellows were as hungry to learn as anyone I had ever known. A little quick anecdote about that. So one guy said to me one day that he had to move, and I said, "How come?" He said, "Well, I've been here 3 years." I said, "Oh?" He said, "Yeah, I only have 150 sermons, and I've just gone through them all, and I have to go somewhere else." And I said, "Don't go somewhere else. You're great here. Come to seminary and learn how to learn. Be a lifelong learner. Learn how to do research. Learn how to do theology, and learn the history of sound doctrine and good theology." He said, "Well, I could never do that," and he didn't. I mean, I'm making my case, but he was not willing to do that. God bless him. But that was the second bag I brought with me. I not only want the fellows in the global South, but fellows right here in the United States who have been in the parish long enough to know that they need longer and greater theological education. May we provide that. And I've found that especially non-denominational fellows, evangelical fellows, they were hungry for a master's degree, a Master of Divinity degree. And we excel in providing an extraordinary Master of Divinity degree with exegetical studies and historical studies and doctrinal studies and practical studies. And we do that coupled with an internship or a vicarage, culminating in a Master of Divinity degree that would serve anyone in those denominations, though without apology, we are decidedly confessional in our Lutheranism. And what I found is that fellows who weren't Lutheran wanted to learn what we believed. And frankly, most of them agreed that we believe what the Bible teaches, which is exactly what we want to say. So that was the second bag I brought with me. What do you think?
I mean, I think in today's world where there's questions about truth, goodness, and beauty, and what is truth, we said last episode, we talked about how it's really important to train pastors and lay leaders how to build relationship, right? How do we have genuine human relationship? And again, that's going to be a consistent theme. But also, it's incredibly important, perhaps now more than ever, to also raise up theologians that know how to understand the truth, how to know what truth is, how to discern God's given truth. How do we convey that? How do we defend it? I mean, Paul in his epistles talks repeatedly about clear teaching and the ears that won't want to hear. And even when Jesus was teaching, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. There's always been a temptation to run away from the truth. And so I think today there is a hunger among the faithful to be equipped in a way that perhaps people haven't had to be. And pastors, maybe historically, especially in other denominations, like you said, that haven't required master's level education, that are looking to that, but still want to serve their parish faithfully.
And it's been my experience that the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And it sounds like some of those guys, Dr. Lyons, were having that same experience.
That kind of leads me to the third bag I carried in with me in 2010. Yes, I was concerned for the global South, absolutely. And I was concerned for the fellow who was serving in ministry but did not yet have a master's degree. But what I also realized, because ALTS was doing something different, the residential education needed to be supplemented, and that's why this online education had been provided, had begun. What I began to see most authentically was how much seminary had changed since I was there. At the early teens, 2012, 13, 14, well, I was 40 years out of seminary. I entered seminary in 74. So what was going on then? Well, in the 70s, it seemed that everyone got married when they left high school or when they left college. Not so in 2013, 14, 15. As a parish pastor in 2013, I was seeing people come to marriage in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. First marriage. I remember the first couple in their 50s who asked to be married for the first time. It wasn't just seminary that was changing. The entire society, all the demographics were changing. It wasn't just people weren't getting married until their 30s or 40s. They weren't coming to seminary until their 30s or 40s. So how do you provide for a guy who wants to be a Lutheran pastor, who has 2 car payments, a house payment, 3 kids, and 1 in college, and tell him, well, you're going to pick up everything, you're going to move, but don't stay long, don't unpack the boxes, because 2 years later you're going to be on vicarage, but don't put down roots, because a year later you're going to move back, and after a year you're actually going to get your first call. So how many moves are you going to make with all those kids and all those responsibilities? Plus he's got a job and a career he's been working at for 17, 18, 20, 25 years. It became a reality. And not only was it inefficient to do what I was doing before, visiting other countries, but it was an unrealistic expectation that those guys were going to do residential education when there was the opportunity to receive everything that they needed where they were. We just had to make sure that we provided them what they needed academically and what they needed relationally. And that's where I think that we have really worked to specialize at ALTS. A strong academic education with relational pastoral care for every student.
I mean, that's what being a Seelsorger is, right? It's individual care, individual preparation. And that's what we're about. That's who we are.
The Seelsorger is one who gives the care and cure of souls. And we want to inculcate that in the lives of those who graduate from ALTS by giving them genuine care ourselves. Faculty and staff have that responsibility so that there's an imprimatur of sorts. There's a seal upon them. This is how I've been trained. This is how I'm to serve and care for others. The other thing that strikes me, and I don't mean to get ahead of us, but sometimes seminaries are seen primarily or even exclusively as academic environments. And I'm not in any way suggesting that they shouldn't be academic environments. I just suggest that they shouldn't only be academic environments. Yes, we must rightly teach and preach the Word of God, and yes, we must administer the sacraments in their purity, no doubt. But we must do that as caring human beings who are caring for the souls of those around us, both those who are churched and those who are unchurched. How do you build a relationship? How do you maintain a relationship? How do you start a congregation out of nothing? How do you even start a conversation out of nothing? These are basic ingredients, necessities, in terms of pastoral formation, building human relationships. And it doesn't matter how good our ivory tower academics might be, if we're not able to translate them into individualized, caring, genuine personal relationships, we're not getting the job done.
Yeah, I mean, I think you made a really interesting point that seminary education, even residentially, has just changed a lot in the last few decades culturally. You talked a bit about your experience. I mean, Dr. Kahi, you were educated residentially too at Westminster. What differences, similarities do you have in with Dr. Lyons' perspective? What have you noticed, then and now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's been a long time since I was in seminary, so I don't know what at least my residential seminary looks like in 2026. But I just want to start by saying I had a really wonderful experience in residential seminary education, but at least in my experience, it was almost exclusively academic. They were just starting to experiment with having faculty lead some small groups and being responsible for a certain portion of the student population, but it was still mainly academic. But one of the things that I really appreciated about residential education was being able to walk into a physical library and just roam around and grab some books off the shelf and go sit down at a table and just dig into those books.
So then, with your experience residentially, how do you think we at ALTS seek to accomplish those very same things?
Well, we certainly are academic, and Dr. Lines mentioned that. And as we are going through our accreditation process, we're realizing how to improve even more on the academic aspect while not sacrificing the crown jewel for ALTS, which is forming seal sorters. But also, as part of accreditation, we've realized that we needed a more robust library resource than we had. And so we have subscribed to the Digital Theological Library, which rivals a library like Stanford's Theological Library. And so our students have access to tremendous resources.
Yeah, and I think that means that unlike a physical library where if you took a book off a shelf, that meant someone else couldn't take a book off a shelf. For us, I mean, all of us can access the same resources. So when we have a syllabus and a class that we have to get materials for, I mean, we can all access the same electronic version of the book, and there's not a limitation on that. But sorry, Dr. Lyons, I think we detracted from your 3 suitcases there of your story.
Let's jump on what you're saying. I think what you're saying is really good. So I finished class last night. It ran from 7 to 9:30, but people didn't want to leave at the end of class. And we just finished the second class of this quarter. And they're beginning to think about the research papers that they're going to be doing. The midterm is coming up. They have to have their title, thesis statement, outline, and bibliography in by week 5. And people are scrambling, so everyone wanted to stay after. So that's great, It may be 9:30 at night Central Time, 10:30 Eastern Time, but people want to talk. I'm thinking about zikaron and anamnesis. What texts should I be reviewing? And so I shot that student 25 books that. Take a look at Dom Gregory Dix, and don't forget Jungmann, and so on and so forth. Ligier, Talley, so forth. Okay, so we'll get a chance to look at some Hebrew stuff and Finkelstein and Glasser and so on, and then we'll look at some anamnetic language and patristic material. Hippolytus and so forth. See, that's that guy. But the next guy wanted to talk about vestments and the origin of vestments, the development of vestments, and he comes from a Scandinavian root. So okay, then let's start with that. So we're going to run down that list. Someone else wants to do the development of Mariology and the veneration of Mary. Oh, that's great. Okay. So now we run down the list of those bibliographical resources so that student can get focused on what he or she is looking to learn. Now, I say he or she because we have an abundance of women in our master's programs. We have an MAR and an MAT program. These do not prepare women for holy orders. We don't ordain women. And the preparation for holy orders is a Master of Divinity. But we have marvelous academic students who are women. In fact, some of the best students we have are women, and they're just tremendous in terms of historical research and clarity of doctrine. And frankly, look at St. Jerome, and I think it was Pauline Eustochium who hung around Jerome in the caves on either side of. And at any rate, there's a long history of training women to be good scholars. And we want to do that. But my point is that people are getting individualized care so that though they don't have a library in their own home, they have access to over 100 million volumes in the Digital Theological Library, and many, many times that number of journal articles. So I'll point people to Studia Liturgica or some other journal that is germane to their interest. Every professor is about that business, meeting carefully, personally, pastorally with each student. Yes, that's a high priority. And though we don't have a physical library through which you can wander, you do have a personal contact with a theologian and pastor who will listen to your issues, concerns, desires, interests, and walk with you in that process.
Yes, and I mean, in a way, because physical seminary, residential seminary comes with the limitations it puts on students if you need to uproot and go and potentially move if you're studying for holy orders multiple times. And that means that there's also all this money that gets funneled into the administrative capacity necessary to run that. And this is not a criticism, that's just a reality, right? When you have a physical institution, you have floors that need to be cleaned. You have more payroll because you need more full-time staff and faculty. You need a lot of money gets funneled into just maintaining the physical existence of that. Whereas I think in our context, the running an online seminary allows us to devote more of our resources towards students we have, and it purely just runs the necessities of what do we need to do to ensure that we have a library, a digital library accessible to students. How do we ensure that we have all the technology that we need in order to do that? How can we help students pay for their degrees, right? We can funnel money into scholarships. And with all of this, sometimes there can be a misconception that if you're in an online program, you don't get to know your professors or your fellow students. But at least in our context, on the contrary, I mean, I think our professors know our students quite well, and they're talking on the phone or hopping on Zoom calls. They're meeting in in-person retreats, or for the men preparing for ministry at the pastors' conferences, or anyone at the general conventions. Like, there's a lot of opportunities, both virtually and in person, for people to get to know each other, and it does happen.
This financial component is a reality that everyone faces when they think about education, whether it's at a baccalaureate degree or at a master's or a doctoral degree. Recently, when I was appointed as the president of the seminary, I did some research. And I looked at a seminary that is residential and well-respected, and I saw that their annual budget was $18 million. And I was astounded, not only at the cost, $18 million a year was their budget, but that they were in the black because they had borrowed from the memorial funds $3 million because it had cost them $21 million to keep their doors open that year. Now, man, that's a tough nut to crack. And I'm, in some measure, very thankful that we don't have to crack that nut. But I can say this. The last national convention, general convention we approved a $250,000 budget for the seminary. And with that $250,000, we have all of our faculty and all of our courses and all of our staff, our communications, our marketing, our DTL, digital library, an office manager, an accountant, an auditor, an accreditation coordinator, an accreditation consultant, a provost, an administrator, a registrar, an engagement and communication advisor, and 6 professors of various disciplines. That is, a professor of biblical languages, a professor of biblical studies, a professor of Lutheran dogmatics, a professor of church history, a professor of practical theology, and a professor of doctoral studies, and a number of adjunct faculty, plus the retreats and the conventions that we provide for our students at no cost to them. So how do we do that? Well, we do it on a shoestring by charging the most ridiculously low tuition that anyone can imagine, and by paying our faculty and staff a pittance because of their dedication to Christ and their willingness to serve Christ and his church. Nobody makes much money, but we don't charge much money. And frankly, it doesn't cost us a lot of money. No 18 million to run this place per year. $250,000. I think next year, I'm going to propose a budget that's a little bit heavier. We may be in the $300,000 range. Yeah, but we're going to do everything that we can to provide the strongest theological, academic education with the best practical, experiential, pastoral education. And for those who are doing MAT and MAR studies, the ladies and gentlemen who are laymen and laywomen, we want to give them that same pastoral care with that same academic rigor. Man, I feel more like a commercial. I'm sorry for that. But I just really love this seminary and what we're able to do and how we can attract all kinds of students, men and women, young and old, most of whom are carrying a lot of responsibility, which is a great way to begin ministry. You're carrying a family and a secular job, and you're working at your church, and you want a theological education, and you got bills to pay and kids to raise. That sounds like the kind of person who can do the multitasking of care in the parish.
I think so. And I mean, I have never been around a group of people that just loves what they do and who they're doing it for and their calling more than I've seen here. I mean, Dr. Lyons talked about, it's not like it's not like the teaching faculty are not in this for the money. So tell me, why do you do this? Why do you teach biblical studies here?
Yeah, of course, Dr. Lyons was being honest and serious. I was going to interject that we are all paid very handsomely, which is not true, and it's facetious. But what's worth even more than the pittance that Dr. Lyons mentioned is being able to invest in the students. The relationships that I'm building with ALTS students, both in class, but also in person when we get together at pastors' conferences, at the national conventions, and at our summer seminars, those are probably worth more to me than the paycheck that I get.
I mean, I think all the students would agree that, I mean, these are lifelong relationships. I mean, I know, I mean, I'm both the engagement and communications advisor. I'm also a student. And so I know that my relationship with both of these two men and all of our other faculty will last well beyond, my final year and a half that I have as a student. So, I mean, I think that's the joy of what we do. Hi, this is John Austin of The End of Christianity as We Know It. Thank you for listening. This was part 1 of a 2-part episode series on online education. So if you're interested, please watch episode 3 next week to get the concluding thoughts. If you like this episode, please like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks. God bless.